The six thinking hats. The six thinking hats are a concept of different ways of thinking put under the categories of coloured hats. This theory was developed and implemented by Edward D. Bono. Fairly simple to understand, the six thinking hats serve an important purpose in the classroom. That purpose is quoted from Edward D. Bono. The purpose of the six hats is to unscramble thinking so that the thinker is able to use one thinking mode at a time instead of trying to do everything at once. Unquote. Now, understanding what the hats are important for, the next thing is to understand what are the six thinking hats. Well, to start with, there are 6 of them, questionably 7, each of them representing a different type of thinking that is undergone in the classroom and most environments in day-to-day life. It is a fairly simple concept that underlines what kind of thinking you as a person are undergoing at any time, making note of what you're thinking with a methodical use of each hat. To first understand what the 6 hats are, it must be got into detail what each hat actually represents in terms of thinking. The first hat, the white hat, quote, calls for information known or needed, the facts and just the facts, end quote. The white hat covers information and hard facts, a simple hat that represents intellect alone, free from bias. When a person uses this hat of thinking, they're simply doing that, thinking. One must be careful to use this hat, as information can come from different arguments and opinions. Despite the white hat being free of personal bias, this bias would come from an outside influence. The second hat, the yellow hat, quote, symbolizes brightness and optimism. You can explore the positives and probe for value and benefit, end quote. The yellow hat covers the logical positives and involves analysis looking for the benefits of a situation or stimulus. As a key part in problem solving, the yellow hat includes looking at feasibility. What are the benefits? What way is possible, and what is the best way? Simply putting it, the yellow hat asks, quote, how can we make this work? End quote. The next hat, the black hat, quote, signifies caution and critical thinking. Do not overuse! Exclamation mark. Why something may not work. End quote. The black hat is judgment and considered the most important hat. It looks at something and makes the decision based on safety, practicality, and use. This hat can be a disaster if misused, however, as it is a very conservative type of thinking hat, and that is a bad thing if not used in moderation. Such overthinking can prevent creativity and new ways of thinking. Politically, this is generally a right-wing kind of trend, and this hat is used in a more right-wing kind of mindset. The green hat, focused on creativity, possibilities, alternatives, and new ideas. It is an opportunity to express new concepts and perceptions. Lateral thinking could be used here, end quote. The green hat deals with creative thinking and is a hat that asks for outside-the-box kind of thinking. Creating new ideas with this hat is an important part of a person's thinking process, and is a very important hat to use. It can be difficult to use because it also goes against the black hat most of the time, with its ability to make judgment by being creative against logical thinking. Green hat against the black. The green hat's best attributes would be finding alternative solutions and going against inside-the-box kind of thinking by thinking how something can be done in a different way. The blue hat, quote, is used to manage the thinking process. It ensures the 6 thinking hats guidelines are observed, end quote. The blue hat is the master hat, the control hat that represents the critical thinking of a person thinking about thinking. The hat decides what kind of thinking is required for the task, deciding basically to use which hat and thinking how each hat is actually used. For example, it suggests the next step in thinking. End quote. I suggest we try. Continued quote. I suggest we try some green hat thinking to get some new ideas. It's pretty much like the boss of all the other hats. And the red hat, quote, signifies feeling, hunches, and intuition. The place where emotions are placed without explanation. End quote. The red hat focus is on emotion and feelings. This means the hat isn't based on logical facts and information. Such things like gut feelings and hunches are often involved in the use of the red hat. The red hat allows for feelings to come into discussion in any discussion or situation, but this can be dangerous as emotional responses usually don't make sense to others and are not based on any logical argument. The next hat is the debatable hat. It's considered the other hat. The purple hat, aka the other hat. The other hat the biblical perspective is that quote, who decides what is wrong and what is right, end quote. An important aspect of the Christian worldview is the belief that knowledge and the ability to know anything and all origins in an all-knowing God. God is the reference point for the knowledge of what is right and wrong, end quote. The purpose of the other hat is to take more of a spiritual aspect to a classroom, with the introduction of the purple hat referred to as the other hat. The other hat would give Christian perspective to the thinking hats by adding the purple hat, which represents the idea and belief that that good is not simply a perspective, but instead a law of the universe introduced by God. While this is debatable, it provides an interesting insight into a biblical perspective when it comes to the different kinds of thinking a person undergoes to stimulus. I disagree with this hat personally because I disagree with the introduction of this hat personally because we live in a multicultural and religious country. So introducing it to a multicultural educational environment would have the obvious issues of not only offending people of different faith, but distancing them of education. Quote, ethical thinking revolves around what is socially and morally acceptable, while a Christian perspective discernment steps beyond social mores and exercises the belief that God is the absolute source of morality. End quote. This statement itself is up to argument, and a bitter one that may never be resolved. As an argument for this hat that can't be resolved, it should not really be put into an educational setting as a fact, but merely a perspective that is up for interpretation. How can these hats be applied in a classroom setting? Well, easily. The hats represent the different kinds of thinking a student, like any human being, undergoes when exposed to different stimulus. By teaching the concept of the 6 thinking hats, 7 if you include the purple hat, it can be grasped to a better understanding of what the thinking processes that human beings undergo, and this will allow students to better grasp their own state of thinking, allowing them to think in a more concrete fashion when it comes to such concepts. Children, as most people do, love seeking patterns and order. When it comes to thinking, usually such things are hard to put in order, and that makes it more difficult to understand and grasp. To quote Edward de Bono, the man behind the theory and introduction of the 6 thinking hats, he puts forward what the hats are and the benefits of making use of them in a classroom. Quote, it is a simple and effective system that increases productivity. There are 6 metaphorical hats, and each defines a certain type of thinking. You can put on or take off one of these hats to indicate the type of thinking you are using. This putting on or taking off is essential because it allows you to switch from one type of thinking to another. When done in the group, everybody should wear the same hat at the same time. The principle behind the 6 thinking hats is parallel thinking that ensures that all people in the meeting are focused on thinking about the same subject at the same time. In this system, thinking is divided into 6 categories, with each category identified with its own coloured metaphorical thinking hat. Organisations that use the 6 thinking hat systems report that their teams are more productive and in general happier and healthier. End quote. In conclusion, as each hat clearly represents a different type of thinking, it is important for the implementation in the classroom because the student can easily connect with the concept of the 6 thinking hats because of its simplicity. While this is called a theory, it must be remembered that a theory is the highest scientific term to describe a concept, and for this to be accepted as a theory means it has a strong base of evidence for it to being a realistic concept. This theory can relate back biblically with the unofficial and unsupported concept of the purple hat, known as the other hat. The other hat works to serve as a basis for a spiritual sense of right or wrong. The hat serves that purpose because of the Christian idea that good is simply not a perspective but a law given by God, and something that exists separately from the mental and physical aspects of humanity and the universe. The hat also shows that the way of thinking in people might form a structure that could prove some kind of order, or simply be humans trying to put something as random as thought into neat concepts, therefore simplifying them and giving them the appearance of order. The hats provide a concrete understanding of something as different types of thinking, and because of that, it makes it easy to grasp as well as teach, which makes it implementable and necessary for an educational environment. That's all.